It has once again been far too long for any kind of highly detailed recap in our Edge of the Empire campaign for the Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars system. One of the things that occurred to me recently was that I'd never actually shared, at least I don't remember sharing, the name of the campaign. It wasn't really that relevant, as there was only the one campaign, but since the events of two of the members going on vacation for a while and us starting two offshoot campaigns and then a third member starting a third offshoot campaign, and any of these could be run at any particular time depending on who's available, it now takes on more importance that it have a name. And that name is Seeds of Reckoning. And in the last few sessions, those seeds, which were drawn from the original obligations of the characters, those seeds are starting to really sprout, and some are starting to bear wicked fruit. So, what has happened? At the end of the last recap, the characters were described as gathering their resources together, hooking up with this new contact who was not being very successful in the wild space colony that they had found. And he had pitched to them an opportunity, a massive business opportunity, using his connections and their force of personality, their reputations, their success. They would be able to start a new kind of smuggling operation. Basically running heavy guns, like ship-class guns, the parts that manufacture these weapons, running them to new colonies, running them to this particular colony out in wild space, and any particular organization, such as the Rebel Alliance, which might want access to Imperial quality weaponry, even though it's heavily restricted by the Empire. The idea of growing rich from such an undertaking proved to be too tempting for the group. And that's how we left the final recap, them deciding to head into the core. They were going to hook up in a couple of months after they took care of some nagging little details they'd left behind in the Outer Rim. But they would meet up in the core and try and put this plan into action. If you've watched any of these recaps before, you may remember that the group has 5 player characters. And unfortunately, during the last few episodes, we had to say goodbye to one of our players. And so as a result, we also had to say goodbye to his character. And, hopefully the character will be able to appear again, in some kind of future episode. But for right now, the player characters are down to 4. But our host of NPC characters seems to keep growing. So even though we've lost people around the table, the group has spread from 1 ship to 2 ships and actually needs both in order to get everybody around from place to place. But what are they doing? Okay, as I mentioned, they are essentially setting up a relay of bulk freighters that are moving surplus parts that the Empire has paid for but doesn't realize have been made. And these will be shunted through a series of back channels all the way out into the Outer Rim, where then it'll be met by the forces from the wild space colony who can take it under greater secrecy to where it has to go. Seems like an easy enough plan. But so many things needed to be done, so many little things. And this exposed the group to life on core worlds. During play, they've had to visit 3 different, heavily industrialized core worlds of my creation and interact with people. Sometimes to recover elements of their plan which were breaking down, other times to help out allies. So, when this leg of the campaign, when it opened up, it was supposed to begin with a rendezvous with the first and primary bulk freighter captain. And as they dropped out of hyperspace to meet this fellow, all they found was wreckage. Investigation at a nearby industrial planet turned up vague reports, people not really wanting to talk about it, but vague reports of a group of starfighters attacking with, impunity, attacking the bulk freighter and utterly destroying it. And then large vessels coming in to loot the wreckage. Nobody was willing to comment on who did it. It could have been pirates. It could have been, past enemies with a vendetta. Thanks to the group's great investigative ability, both legitimate and less legitimate, they were able to turn these stories into a detailed enough report that they were able to identify exactly what kind of ships had done the attacking. Now, many, many sessions ago, they had obtained the plans, like the marketing plans, for the manufacture of a slightly larger breed of TIE fighter, a two-seater, that ostensibly possessed the power of cloaking itself. So really what we're talking about is the TIE Phantom, which hadn't been launched at that time, but they have now discovered has been. They have been able to uncover the first secretive use of the TIE Phantom in our version of the Star Wars universe. But why would it attack the captain with whom they were having the rendezvous? So they started digging more into the background of the captain, and they found that he was related to a member of the Imperial Intelligence Service who was currently missing in action. But they were intimately aware of why this particular intelligence agent was missing in action, because they had watched him die. And now they're beginning to realize that Imperial intelligence is actually following their trail. The only thing that would get the Empire interested in this freighter was its interactions with them. And the freighter captain's interactions with Jabba the Hutt, which is also tied to interactions with them, because their supply of the rare mineral cortosis to a factory or a consortium that makes armor had facilitated Jabba building cortosis-plated droids, a droid army that he was planning to sell, again, for the same reason as the player characters, to profit in the face of oncoming war. Well, now, his whole shipment is destroyed. Imperial intelligence is on their trail. With a little more digging, they discover bounty hunters from Jabba the Hutt are also on their tail. Two different factions looking for them. They put all this out of their mind and start looking for a different, completely unrelated, very safe, very trustworthy bulk freighter captain to get things in motion. Eventually they find one and they move on to the next stage of their plan. This is where they have to collect crews that they can trust, and this is mostly being handled off-screen by an NPC character, and while this is going on, they're investigating for all of their specific interests relating to their obligations and things. Backslash, the droid who's looking for other members of her production series, is heavily interested in finding out where the last surviving member of that series is. They believe he's in some way associated with the Rebel Alliance. Can they track him down? Well, they move to the next planet. As they come out of hyperspace, another ship follows right on their heels, and it's tumbling out of control like mad. Captain Paul Highwind is a skilled enough pilot that he recognizes that although it looks like the ship is in the midst of distress, it is actually very much a controlled tumble, and it's moving into position to attack them. Normally, they would fight back or run away if they thought that the opposition was too much for them. But in this situation, they've just come out of hyperspace, and ahead of them, they see a Star Destroyer backed up by a decimator. The Star Destroyer is monitoring the hyperspace lanes, and the decimator is in making sure that nothing untoward happens closer to orbit control. They're, in a sense, pinned in between these two Imperial vessels. If they fight back, at long range, on sensors, it may look like they are preying upon a helpless ship. What do? Worse, the Star Destroyer is not a run-of-the-mill Star Destroyer. It's not the class of Star Destroyer they're used to seeing. It's an interdictor. It can prevent them from jumping into hyperspace. Things, of course, heat up and get worse. Escape pods come launching out of this tumbling ship. It's belting out on every channel, distress signals. But they're quickly able to assess that these escape pods are weapons. They're homing weapons that are going to come in. And their little droid is convinced that these are ion weapons as she's trying to offensively slice into the other ship's systems. And she's finding this is to be incredibly difficult. So they're going to be neutralized. And some of these weapons are high explosives. What are they going to do? In the end, great maneuvering by Captain Paul Highwind and Moss, his co-pilot, and great surreptitious gunnery work by HK and Henry handle the program. The offensive slicing has enough time to get in and neutralize the attacking ship's ability to control its droids. In fact, its drones, and they're arcing back to get it. So it ceases its deception and makes a run for hyperspace, getting away. But the interdictor comes sailing in and tells the crew of the Archon that they're going to be taken aboard for interrogation. Tractor beam comes down, and rather than try and run and fight it, because they really need to be here, and they haven't done anything wrong, the crew allows themselves to be taken up into the docking bay of the interdictor, where they spend some uncomfortable hours with several of their members being interviewed by an unnamed, unranked member of the Imperial Intelligence Service. And they're convinced. I feel that they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then they're let go. But while they're aboard, the investigation of our little droid reveals traces of her family member, the other member of her production series, had been in that very same Star Destroyer, had used his technical abilities to facilitate an escape from it. He could be close. They get down to the planet and they start investigating the schedule. What is the port of call for this interdictor, which had the unlikely name of the Infiltrator. And they realize that it's attached permanently to the Imperial Intelligence Service, and Captain Paul Highwind starts to get very nervous because a lot of his background story is tied to being hunted by a particular agent of the Imperial Intelligence Service. And if that agent is present or coming, that ups the stakes from not just 2 organizations hunting them down, but 3. So they get down to the planet and they're taking care of business, but they uncover that the CSA, the Corporate Sector Authority, is meddling around on this planet, and they are actively hunting for one of their NPC allies, Lynn Delmar, who they rescued from prison many, many moons ago. She had become a staunch part of their crew. She had gotten them another ship, and she was recruiting members for this huge scandal. She was an essential part of their future plans. But the CSA, Henry's new sworn enemy, were looking for him. Somebody had identified that she was still alive, not dead like they'd made out during their prison break. 4 enemies represented, but none nosing around just yet. And then somebody tried to kidnap Moss, the Bothan not but closer to being a spy, and T3, the little droid. Someone tried to kidnap them. The attempt failed, and they began to investigate who was trying to capture them, and they discovered it was Rek, the Bothan that they had helped escape from a bounty hunter on Vev Station. They took him all the way out into wild space and took him to the Freedom Colony where he could have lived out his days, unconcerned. But he was back. How did he get back? What was he doing? What was he up to? He was asking them, trying to blackmail them into, for free, smuggling rebel operatives from this Imperial-held world to another Imperial-held world without getting caught. They didn't mind doing the smuggling, but they demanded to be paid. So they turned the tables on Rek, took the job, and shifted their operation to the next planet. They had to go there anyway. So, the issue with the rebels didn't turn into much of anything, although it may have cooled some of the enmity which is beginning to grow between them and the Rebel Alliance, because rumors are starting to filter back that some or all of them were involved in taking out a top rebel agent. Now, during this period was the time where we needed to say goodbye to Jay, our player who runs HK85M. And we did that kind of on a cliffhanger. He disappears in the middle of a complicated combat where the group can't see each other. So we spent a session or two looking for him and becoming more acquainted with the city in which they were in, and recognizing that people were still on their tail even though they had moved to a different system. I couldn't find HK, but they were uncovering that the group that was allied against them were the ones who had come with Rek from the wild space colony. The master, the maker, the character who is intimately tied with the creation of our little droid's production line and their very peculiar slicing abilities, who is the creator of the assassin droids, who is responsible for a lot of hunter-killer droids like HK. He was somehow involved in all of this. And his aide-de-camp droid, this R4 droid, was using Rek and another blast from the past, Lace Striker, who they had freed from prison on a technicality and used as their means of uncovering all the little things that the group had been doing in and around the Vev system. They had twin goals, it seemed. Vengeance against the crew of the Archon, and something else. Well, time waits for no one, and although they're very worried about this fifth group now looking for them, they still have to carry out their plans before they miss the opportunity. And so they have to go to the main spaceport to meet with the mid-level managers who are going to make it possible to put Imperial property on someone else's freighter. Like everything else with this plan, that went as smooth as silk. But when leaving that meeting, everything went to hell. First off, they encountered CSA operatives flanking them. CSA didn't realize that their cover had been blown. They thought that they were just shadowing the group back to wherever, someplace where they could have an ambush, maybe. The group turned the tables on them, captured one, and coerced him, using the Force, interestingly enough, coerced him into revealing what the situation was. And it was pretty dire, but nothing they couldn't handle. But in the process of handling that, Moss encountered bounty hunters, heavily armored bounty hunters, possibly Mandalorians, who were setting up an observation post and overseeing an attempt to kidnap their droid, /. What's going on? The CSA is attacking, and these bounty hunters are trying to kidnap backslash. This all happens at the same time. Then the power in the whole spaceport goes out. Combat ensues. And in the midst of this, in comes someone that they took to be a Jedi at first. Someone who responded to Henry's mad charge, our Force user, who responded to that charge with a lightsaber. The reaction was interesting. This is our first lightsaber in over a year of play. Henry charges in, Captain Paul Hywen backing him up with a very illegal disruptor rifle he'd taken off one of the bounty hunters that they'd been fighting with. CSA was neutralized at this point, and they take down the suspected Jedi. Must be a dark Jedi, right? Because he's attacking them. Henry has drifted far enough away from his very violent early approaches that he did his best to sense, to get a read on who this Force user was, and he recognized that there wasn't really any ill intent at all. So after dealing with the bounty hunters, he and Hywen and Moss smuggle them out. And wonder of wonders, who do they encounter in this confusion but Colin, Backslash's droid counterpart, her brother, for want of a better word. They escape together, filling in the rest of the group on different ways to escape from the spaceport. So while the CSA is converging on the spaceport and the Empire is converging on the spaceport, they're escaping with through the maintenance tunnels underneath. Now the droids have an easy time of this as they go through air shafts that no one else can fit through. But the organic characters, they're left going through major maintenance tunnels which have enough space for speeders. So we have a high-speed speeder chase which ends in disaster for the Imperial agents which are following them. And if you're paying attention, this is now 6 groups. This is just regular Imperial forces which are after them. They have a merry speeder chase. They elude their pursuers and they head back to a safe location where they try and hook up with a Bothan fixer that Moss trusts to get them off-world before things get any worse. They've got a week before they have to meet with their partners in crime again, so they just want to get out of the system, let things cool down, and sneak back in. Good plan. But they have to get off-world first. They have to get off-world with professional bounty hunters chasing them. Professional bounty hunters trying to kidnap their little droid and her relative. With Imperial stormtroopers, Imperial intelligence, this mysterious Force user, and who knows who else on their tail. Taking the Force user with them, they do their best to patch him up and are quite successful because mostly for his injuries he was playing possum. Because Henry scared the crap out of him. but they talked to him like, why are you attacking us? He's like, I wasn't attacking you. It was that kind of pleasant Star Warsian miscommunication. And so they recognized he was an ally, and he was working with Colin to find Backslash. So they have a new ally in face of all of this opposition. So that's great. They still have to get off-world. They managed to trade some important information, namely the plans on how to build and market TIE Phantoms. They trade that in order to get passage off-world, which is great. Captain Paul Hywen gets to meet one of his childhood heroes, a freighter captain who was notorious, possibly a pirate in his younger days. And the captain surrenders the control of his ship to Captain Hywen and says, get us out of here, boy. And so there was a lot of fun there with Hywen under great pressure to prove himself. And me getting to play the captain providing commentary on his ability to do so all the while. Long story short, they do manage to escape from pursuit. They manage to escape from the infiltrator. This time they make a run for it instead of using their social skills, and they were successful. But the sense, this presence of all of this pressure, everywhere they went while they were trying to get off world, while they were trying to meet with their contact, they would find CSA agents or the Empire or both lying in wait for them. How was this information getting to them? Possibly R4. In talking to their new ally, this Force user, not a Jedi, but much closer to one than they've met before, they discover some disturbing facts. R4, this evil rival droid to Backslash, well, his designation is actually R485M. HK's designation was HK85M. Is there a connection? Is there something going on? They learn a lot about this Maker character, this maker of assassin droids, a former Imperial operative who was shunned as the Empire moved away from droids and went more for organics and their ability to control them. And his plan seems to be tied incredibly much to assassination. Our new Jedi-like character is tied to the group through this thread of story. The Maker's tools, his droids, his assassins, wiped out. His instructor, his family, and so on. He's on a mission of revenge. He's struggling with the concept of revenge. He's very much in tune with the light side of the Force, and yet he's compelled to seek some kind of resolution. So that's his struggle. And Henry very much understands this struggle, and the two of them bond fairly quickly. Henry, desperate to be taught things about the Force he doesn't understand, but at the same time able to teach. I like that connection that formed between them. So the group comes together and very quickly as they can, escape from that system and go back to the system where their ships are waiting for them, where Wreck is waiting for them, their Bothan betrayer. And they've realized that a lot of the threads that have linked them to Imperial intelligence, that have linked them to Jabba, that have linked them to their droid pursuers and the bounty hunters, all these trails, all these roads come back to Wreck, who's trying to work his way back into the Bothan intelligence network. So they decide it's really time to take him down a peg or two. So they swoop down, kidnap him, leave the planet, and go hide out in a mining colony for a while. A mining colony run by the Tenlaw Syndicate, with whom they have some connection. And they begin to sort out all the threads. Okay, who exactly is following us? So Highwind comes clean on his background with Agent Crescent and why she's hunting him, and they sort out all the different threads about the Maker and how he's figuring out a way to transfer intelligence into a droid brain. And of course, all of their bounties, all of their different bounties, so many different bounty hunters. The Empire is encouraging bounty hunters to seek out every contract they can. They're desperate to find Solo and Organa and Skywalker and anybody else, right? The barriers to collecting bounties have been dropped immeasurably. So they've got to deal with all of these threats. Everybody has a bounty hunter coming after them individually, and now the group has bounty hunters coming after them for a variety of other reasons, unrelated to anything they might be aware of right now. Imperial intelligence, as I've mentioned, is hot on Highwind's trail, and the CSA wants to at least interrogate them to verify if Lynn Delmar is alive, and if they had anything to do with it, possibly to liquidate them as a result, as repayment. So many people after them all the time. And as if that weren't enough, we end on a cliffhanger. The last session last week, the 5th in a row. And one of their crew members contacts them from the second ship and says, please, can you come back to the ship? And they say, why? He says, it's really important. And as he says that, they hear the sound of a lightsaber activation. And Henry puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that a presence he sensed many sessions ago, they didn't have time to track down, has tracked them down. And the waves of darkness and evil that come from this radio message lets him know that he's about to come face to face with the first dark force user of the campaign. What does he want? What can they give him? Will they have to fight? Tune in for the next recap and we'll find out.